Okay, can I go through to Damien Hines, please?
Thank you, Jim. Can I just invite any of the three of you to define terms here for us? What does public service mean to you in the context of the phrase public service broadcasting? What is the service? Is it something to do with correcting market failure to produce quality, or is it something to do with the equality of access to entertainment, to sport? Is it to do with the public value of truth in news, or is it something else, or is it all of those things mixed together? Anyone?
Shall I go first?
Okay.
Oh my God.
That's a dumb question.
That is such a big question. That's something that I think most of us have been tackling all our academic lives. I think I remember presenting something about this to Philip when I was a PhD student over 30 years ago. Okay. So I would say that it includes all of those. It includes all of those things. So access is really important. Like, everybody should be able to access it free at the point of, delivery. And I think sort of COVID has sort of like thrown up a lot of the difficulties with access in terms of schooling and stuff like that. I mean, we've been doing a bit of research with schools, and it's amazing to find out that, they say like up to 15 to 20% of families don't have Wi-Fi at home, or they can't afford subscriptions, or, mum's got just a mobile phone pay as you go. So, free at the point of access is really important. And at the moment, it might seem old-fashioned and a bit rubbish, but TV generally is kind of free at the point of access, assuming you pay your license fee, of course. The other thing I would say is that, there are two different ways of, there are probably more ways of looking at this. You could have this really narrow view of public service broadcasting, which is kind of the American view, which is the PBS view, where, you either do just stuff up for the under sixes like Sesame Street, or you do it for the over 50s like Downton Abbey. So that's kind of the sort of the really narrow view. Or you do a bit of news, or you do it the British way, which has always been very, very broad amount of programming. And we always talk about entertainment, information and education. One of the things we never really concentrate on is entertainment, and how important that is, and how important that is in connecting with a broad scope of people in the UK, not just white middle class people living in Cambridge, but people living across the UK, people who like to watch EastEnders, who like to watch Bake Off, who like to watch Neighbours on Channel 5. So I think that's really important. And I think those decisions about what type of public service broadcasting you want, whether you want this really sort of narrow view or whether you want this broad, all-encompassing view, that's something that we're debating now. And I think the views on that are quite split. But I've probably said enough now. So hand over.
Thank you. Philip, do you remember some aspects from the essay you read some years ago? Go on, did you want to add to that?
Jeanette said that. I'm sure it was very good. I think really it's a really interesting question, and I think it opens up a lot of other issues. And you could start off by citing the Rethian triad, which was the foundation, if you like, of the public service principle. And I think if we look at this historically, we have to see what we think public service broadcasting is as something that's periodically negotiated. And I think what this committee is doing is precisely looking into this question at one of those moments when what we think the boundaries and the content of public service broadcasting, or possibly public service media, is once again being renegotiated. And one of the big historical turning points really was in 2004, when Ofcom formally defined what it thought public service broadcasting was about. And then if you look at successive BBC charters, you find that they establish a different range of values which the BBC, for example, is supposed to be pursuing. So I think what it is about is what we think is important at this time and what we want to retain of what there has been. And, I think this committee and what the House of Lords has done and wider public debate that's going on now is absolutely crucial in looking at those parameters. And I think, if I were to state my preference, I would certainly want public service broadcasting that is entertaining. There is the sense that it should be telling stories about us all. That's in the BBC Charter, actually. And I would want a public service broadcasting that actually is a place that people can go to for some kind of measured view and some kind of view that is common across the piece. And those are really very fundamental values. And how we operationalize that is another question. And clearly we're now in new circumstances where precisely how it finds its way to younger audiences, what the scope of it is, all of these questions are in some sense up for grabs, but there is a historical weight which I think will continue to play a role.
I'll just very quickly comment that because I think both have said a lot of what I want to talk about, but I think that the distinction between the public service ethos and the institutions that deliver that. And I think often when we talk about public service broadcasting, we collapse the two. And I think that's been natural in terms of regulation over the last few decades. But I think there is also times when it's useful to separate those two things. So in terms of the public service ethos, we might have, as Jeanette and Philip both said, around universality and around diversity. But I think also the institutional question is a separate but important one. And I think for me, there's two principles there that I think are really important. There's first of all, the one of pluralism, a mixed economy of public broadcasters and suppliers as well. And the second one is around accountability, the value of accountability in a media landscape that is often unregulated in some places and in some institutions. We have regulatory levers, we have forms of governance that allow us to intervene in this media market. And I think that that's a really important asset and a really important part of the landscape here in the UK.
Philip, can I ask you, so in the case of drama, it's only one part of it, in the case of drama, does Netflix and Amazon and Sky basically prove that the market can provide and will provide quality? Yes. And do you think many people were surprised by people's, at different income levels, by the way, people's willingness to pay for quality telly?
Yes, I think there's absolutely no question you can get some outstanding drama from Netflix and from Prime and from Sky. No question whatsoever about it. I don't think. I think that's extremely welcome. I think the fact of that means, you know, if the point is, can you get quality anywhere if you're willing to spend enough and you get the talent? The answer is yes. That doesn't mean that you know, we shouldn't seek to have that publicly accessible through publicly regulated media as well. I think the two are not incompatible. There is a certain complementarity, but I don't think there's a displacement of public service principles and public service institutions by the mere fact of the discoverability of high quality drama on Netflix, which I certainly view as I do Prime.
And can I ask, sorry, Jeanette, I'm conscious of just the time. Can I ask just all of you, any of you have a view on this? So when you do have a channel, you know, a media property that has attracted people for the quality of its content, do you think all of them should have a responsibility to incidentally expose people to news and current affairs? Does anybody have a view on that? So the point being, one of the features of BBC and ITV historically has been you will stumble across the news every so often. You can watch Netflix for a whole weekend binge watching series and never come close. Does anyone have a thought on that? Yes.
Well, I think, yeah, we know that Netflix does great drama and stuff, but Netflix itself says that that's not what its business is about. It doesn't do news. It doesn't do sport. That's its money-making thing, which is to do fantastic, high-quality drama. But that's not what public service broadcasting is about. We expect more from them. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that, you know, there's a certain fluidity there as well, because I think, you know, BBC in particular has worked with Netflix, it's worked with Amazon. So, you know, they learn from each other and they benefit from each other. I think what the public service broadcasters in the UK are doing, and I would put ITV and Channel 4 into this as well, is that they can offer at times a different type of drama. So the sort of stuff that Netflix is doing is appealing to that transnational audience. But what I expect you know, the BBC or ITV to do. I expect them to do some of that. Sometimes they might do that in partnership with Netflix, but I also expect them to do stuff which is, you know, a drama sort of located in the East Midlands or whatever, which is very, which appeals to all of us as well, but probably wouldn't do so well in the international market.
So back on definitions and high-level principles, one of the questions we've kept coming back to on this committee is this question of the balance between content and curation. What is the, you know, if you're a public service organisation, is your core business to make stuff, good stuff, no matter where it appears, or is your core business to gather together good stuff from whoever it comes and serve it up in one place? Katrina.
This is a difficult one. I think it depends really on the genre. I'm kind of drawn here about genre, and I think we're collapsing a lot of the discussion here about in the entirety. And I think here there's a distinction perhaps between drama and news, I feel is the most obvious one. So as Jeanette said, you know, there is the universal appeal of something like Stranger Things, but then you also want the Derry Girls, you also want the I May Destroy You, that are very culturally specific. But then when we talk about news then, and here, and I think we kind of go back to the prominence, we want to have, you know, one of the things that's been really illustrated during COVID is about how much people trust the public broadcasters in relation to news. And I think that has been a really important feature of our media landscape. And so, you know, we want to make sure that the prominence of their news reporting on Facebook or, you know, as I'm scrolling, that I'm not just seeing, you know, random people talking about 5G and the kind of the threats of 5G, or vaccination will be the next thing. So I think for me, there's a question of genre and where we get certain things is where I would go with this.
Thank you. And Jeanette, when you were talking earlier about children's content and the need to, you know, be on every shelf effectively, and the biggest shelf is YouTube, I just wonder with kids, if you think the battle is now lost. So whether there is any purpose, any point in BBC, ITV, Channel 4 trying to get kids to come to their own owned channels. I don't mean channel just in the old capital C sense of the word, but their online properties. Or actually, if you have to seed that ground and just say, I'm going to produce great kids content and stick it on YouTube.
No, absolutely not. If they stop making children's content, then they might as well pack up and go home.
Stop making, no, I didn't say stop making children's content.
Yeah.
The question is where it appears, and if the battle has already been lost in terms of trying to get, or on its way to being lost, in terms of getting kids to come to your owned channel or property.
I don't.
I'm going to put the stuff on YouTube and whatever else comes next.
No, I don't think it's been lost, and I think also I think you need to look at the children's audience as being quite diverse itself. You know, what a 3 or 4 year old is going to watch is going to be quite different from a 12 to 13 year old. And what you get at the beginning, when children are very small, then their parents kind of have greater control of what they watch. So things like CBeebies or Milkshake, the premier sort of public service brands, they do really, really well. And Milkshake, for example, is, you know, it's been investing a fair amount. It's been making use of the Young Audience Content Fund. CBeebies does very well. It's incredibly trusted. Whenever there are sort of surveys done, you know, parents like it. I think the difficulty comes when children start doing their own things, sort of, you know, increasingly younger, from about 8 or 9, and they start moving to other platforms. But I do not think that it's lost. In a way, I feel very sad sometimes about the commercial PSBs that, you know, they stop doing stuff for kids and then they say it's not economically viable. But if you don't offer it to them, then they're not going to come, are they? So I think Channel 4 is doing quite a lot to sort of rectify that with older, younger audiences, and there's been some success there. And they're also engaging much more cohesively with social media. And the Young Audience Content Fund, as you know, has been set up to kind of fill some of those gaps. It's still a bit too early to say, you know, how well that has performed, and it's been slightly disrupted by COVID because a lot of the shows that they want to do like live action things and stuff, they can't film them at the moment. But I think that's a really interesting experiment in the children's sector. It is limited to broadcasters, so it has to be freely available. So I think the difficulty there is sometimes persuading the commercial PSBs to engage, but they have done. They have funded new projects and the fund has put up some money. I think, maybe that's a question for later, but I think the future of the fund, and whether it just sticks to kids or whether it's expanded to other genres. I mean, personally, I would prefer to see it stick just to kids, but that's my own personal preference. But I think the politics of it might make that quite interesting in the future.
Thank you. And my last question to Philip, to you, which I'd like to put in the form of a proposition. You were speaking earlier about media literacy, and there is some evidence some reason to believe that when we promote media literacy, actually some people end up just distrusting everything because you end up sort of taking everything apart. So the proposition I wanted to put to you was, should we instead be encouraging children to value brands, trusted brands, not brainwash them about what those brands should be? You can pick The Guardian or you can pick The Telegraph, but to know that there is something special about being a brand with decades or hundreds of years of history built up in trust, and in order to encourage them to be drawn towards sources that actually you can believe in.
I think that's a really interesting question. And actually, when you raise the issue of curation, I put down two things: branding and channels. And I think we're not really in a post-channel setup yet, but clearly brands are absolutely key to following through content as it is distributed by different means. So I think that would be a very sensible way of doing it. It's a kind of shorthand, but obviously, in order to understand the shorthand, you have to be quite a consumer, and you have to gain value from it. Otherwise, you simply won't think the brand is worth following. So I think it presupposes quite a lot, but I think as a way into the problem, I think it's a really good suggestion.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you.